Welcome to the new semester and a new subject, law. We'll be taking law and ethics. And this joint class is for the students of MBA, MBA IB, and MHA. So uh, today we'll be just discussing what is law and then most of the topics they are related to the Indian Contract Act. So we'll take up later on those topics. Why is law necessary to be studied by business students? Can we have some response to this?
To perform any business, sir, we have to be compliant. It has to be compliance with the rule of the land. That's why we must know the law.
Rule of the land. So everybody has to comply to the rule of land. But why so specifically for the business students? Because we'll be studying business law here.
So to perform in long run, we have to comply with the all laws and rules and regulation according to the countries in which our business is performing.
Okay. So naturally, the legal regulatory framework that has been prescribed by the government and is enforced by the government that has to be observed by business organizations. There are 3 units relating to legal issues, and there are 2 units relating to ethics. These 3 units which are related to the legal issues, most of the topics they relate to the Indian Contract Act. Because the answer to my question, which I posed to the students, that not only business organizations, but as individuals even, every day we have to make contracts. We enter into contracts. Although sometimes we do not realize that we have entered into a contract with someone. Like, for example, if you board a bus from Aligarh to, say, Greater Noida or Noida, and once you sit in the bus and the bus starts, you have entered into a contract with the transport company and you're bound to pay the price of the ticket. So although we do not realize, but when we enter into a contract. Likewise, if you go to a restaurant and you sit on the table and you order the food, you have entered into a contract with the restaurant. So on a daily basis, we enter into contracts. So that's why most of the topics, they are related to the Indian Contract Act. There are topics which are related to the sale of goods, then topics like guarantee and topics, intellectual property rights, and all those areas are to be covered in the first 3 units. Now, this first slide that I have presented to you, this basically I've developed it myself, and this particular definition that I have developed, it includes every aspect of law. Basically, law is a set of rules. So, and these rules, they are framed by some institution, whether government, or sometimes the rules, they are framed on a bilateral basis between organizations. So we will take up the different definitions of the different types of laws. For example, the public law, the law that is developed by the government, the private law that is entered between two persons or two organizations, or between an individual and an organization or institution. So these rules, they have to be observed. There is strict compliance requirement from individuals as well as organizations to to basically submit to these rules. And there are those in the rules itself, there are provisions how the rules are to be enforced. So if rules are made but there is no proper enforcement, then there is no rule, the use of rules. So naturally enforcement mechanism has to be then developed by the government or by any institution, and within even the private those contracts, those rules relating to the enforcement mechanism, they have to be written down and agreed as a clause in that particular contract. So coming back to the definition, that law is an enforceable body of rules. That means the rules have to be enforced. Uh, it provides guidelines and boundaries within which an individual or institution operates, specifies those boundaries that are not to be crossed, and provides penalty for violations, if any. So naturally, those institutions or individuals which are subject to these rules, they have to respect those boundaries which are prescribed by the law. They cannot violate those boundaries. They cannot transgress those boundaries. If they transgress those boundaries, then they would be subject to penalty for any such violations. Now, the rules also provide certain rights to the individuals or institutions, protection and freedom to each individual or institution. Although there are rights, but then there are the boundaries also which are specified, and those boundaries have not to be crossed. So whether it's a right to or freedom to speech, or right to and freedom to movement, but then if the rules prescribe those boundaries, they should not be violated. And it's a government's intervention that sometimes the government changes those rules, and those boundaries also change as a result. And the freedom that is given to the individuals or institutions, sometimes there's a curb on those freedoms as per the requirement which the government may foresee over a period of time. So the government is free to change those rules. So rules are, they are ever changing. They are not static. They are dynamic, and in line with the rules that are framed from time to time, the individuals and institutions, they have to comply with those rules. There's a common saying that ignorance of law is no excuse. And this is the reason why the students of business, they have to study these legal, these rules and the laws relating to business. And once the rules are framed and the government publishes those rules, then each individual or institution, they have the obligation to comply with those rules. In the slide, we have given you the basic objectives of legal system. First is maintain order. So order has to be maintained, and in order to ensure the observance of maintenance of the order, the rules are necessary. So whether it's the traffic system in a particular city, where there are traffic lights and traffic rules which should not be violated. Otherwise, there would be a traffic jam. And so, likewise, in every type of, say, type of conduct for the individuals or institutions, there are rules. Reserve Bank of India has rules for the banks. SEBI has rules for the companies that trade on the stock exchanges. And so then second is resolve conflict. Whenever there are business transactions, sometimes conflicts arise. And the conflicts, majority of times, even if both the parties to the that particular contract, if they strictly observe their obligations, still there may be conflicts, and conflicts may arise as a result of unforeseen circumstances that may arise from time to time. Suppose there is strike, transport strike, and the seller is not able to send or dispatch the goods on time. There may be a conflict between the buyer and the seller. Suppose the goods are destroyed once they are sent through transportation, then there may be a conflict. So when the rules are framed by the government or any institution, and then both the parties, they subscribe to those rules, or sometimes they within the overall framework of the public law, they develop their own rules. That is called the private law, which the two parties enter into, like a contract between a seller and buyer, where the buyer and the seller may have full freedom in structuring their deal, structuring their contract. So all the clauses which they would be agreeing to in that particular contract, they would include all those clauses, and even additional clauses within the overall that framework which is prescribed by the government. So this basically solves the problem of resolving the conflict which may arrive at any time, because any particular contract has to be very clear. There should not be any ambiguity in the terms of the contract or in any of the clauses of the contract, like the date of the delivery of the goods, or the price of the goods, or the quality of the goods which are to be sold, or any other such term that they may enter into. So rules basically serve as a means of resolving the conflict. And if suppose there arises a conflict, so they would approach a court of law, and the court will decide on the basis of the rules or those clauses which they entered into mutually, with mutual consent of each other, and the ruling would be decided on the basis of that particular contract. So rules, or law is necessary to resolve the conflict between individuals, between individual and organizations, between various organizations, even between countries, even between organizations belong to different countries. The next is preserve dominant values. Any idea about what are dominant values? Yes, out of the, yes, please.
Environment friendly.
Yes, friendly. Okay, good. Okay, that means in a positive sense, isn't it? And positive values, they are dominant always. And the law, it sides with the positive values. For example, say cleanliness, or say punctuality. Okay, so those who have joined the class and are punctual in the class, naturally they are observing the law, isn't it? So uh, we have at the moment 66 students who have joined this class, and they are punctual. Nobody can compel them not to be punctual. Nobody can compel you not to be, say, to remain clean. Nobody can compel the any person not to not to love others. So whether it's love, whether it's say um, punctuality, whether it's concern for others, whether it's any good trait, uh, nobody or the law does cannot force anybody not to observe that good trait. So these good traits, whether it's cleanliness, whether it's punctuality, whether it is concern for the, says, for the society, whether it is love for the humankind. I mean, these dominant values, they are preserved through law. So that means these dominant values, they are embedded in the law, and the law takes the responsibility of preserving these dominant values. Then fourth is the guarantee freedom. Now this guaranteeing freedom means that the law gives freedom to the people or institutions to operate, of the conduct of individuals or institutions. Now, but then there are certain boundaries also, as I had given in the in the definition itself, that although there is freedom to each individual or institution, but then there are certain boundaries which are specified under the law and they are not to be crossed. So whether it's freedom of expression, but then that freedom of expression should not harm the sentiments of a particular community, for example, or freedom of movement, but you cannot trespass in the, say, the premises of somebody else. So although the law guarantees freedom, you can walk on the road freely, but then you cannot trespass. So there is freedom that is given by the law, but the law also has specified the boundaries which are not to be crossed. For business organizations, there is freedom to conduct business or trade, but then there are boundaries also that are specified under the law. So those boundaries are not to be crossed. Then we come to the reasons for government intervention. First is market failure. Now this is because of inadequate information. Market failure, basically why this happens, because the consumers sometimes they get cheated by the acts of the companies or organizations which are selling certain products or services. So complete information has to be provided by the companies to the consumers, and if there is inadequate information, perhaps that would basically violate the rights of the consumers, because they would not be able to assess the quality standards of those products or services. So for certain types of products, like for example pharmaceutical products or food products, there is a guideline for these companies to label their the packaging with the information relating to the ingredients that are that are used in those products, or with respect to the shelf life of the products. So that particular information is provided. So this is one government intervention. Second is monopoly. Perhaps you may be aware of this particular term. You may have studied in economics this particular term. What is this monopoly?
Isn't of single firm, sir?
Yes, yes. A particular firm, if it has an influence, it has a size, it has a sphere of activity that is too large, and it controls the supply of goods or services, and there are very less competition, or even no competition. Perhaps that would be a monopoly. So if a particular organization has a monopoly, it would there are no competitors. There are no, say, those companies which would basically supply similar goods or substitute goods or substitute services. And since if there are no competition, so that particular company would be at a freedom to institute any price for the products or services. So prices could be raised or lowered at will by that particular company. The prices would not be determined by the free forces of demand and supply in the market. So it's necessary to have a competitive price which is based on the free flow of goods in the market, and the free forces of demand and supply operate in that particular market. When there are a lot of suppliers to that particular market, there would be price competition. So there would be price competition as well as competition to supply the goods with a better quality. So better quality goods at lower prices could be supplied if there is competition between the suppliers of those goods.
हेलो डॉक्टर संदीप।
सर क्लास में ही नहीं है।
अच्छा, मुझे बस ये पूछना था कि उनकी क्लिनिक आज खुलेगी कि नहीं, अगर आप बता सके तो।
छुट्टी।
जी, आपको कुछ आइडिया हो तो आप बता सकते
चलें?
हैं आज उनकी क्लिनिक खुलेगी कि नहीं?
चलो बंक कर लेते हैं।
जी, जी। थैंक यू सो मच।
Artist.
जरूर आता है वैसे अंदर बैठे थे अंदर बैठे अंदर अंदर आता है
There was some disruption in the network, so I could not. I had to reconnect. So we're the neighborhood effects. Okay. Then we have public goods and services. So public goods and services, like for example, the basic education uh, is provided by the government because private organizations their fee structure is very high, and perhaps for the economically weaker sections, the government has a concern for providing those goods and services. So services. Likewise, um, certain goods, like for example, clean drinking water, basic health facilities. So such type of services and goods, they are provided by the government. Then we have philosophy and politics. Naturally, philosophy, different governments that come to the power, they have certain philosophies, and they design the rules according to their philosophies. And that's why the law is dynamic, ever dynamic, and there are changes which are made in the law from time to time. So, as a result of government intervention, philosophy is it's not just the negative, say, connotation. Even sometimes there is a concern for the new government to bring a change in the law in line with the requirement of the society at large. So there are concerns for say controlling certain uh, un, un I mean unsocial or those activities which are carried out in the public, and so perhaps the government may bring out those changes. Then activity of the government regulatory agencies. The regulatory agencies of the government, like for example the Reserve Bank of India, um, IRDA, which is related to the insurance companies. Then we have other regulatory agencies which are responsible for ensuring that there's no adulteration in the food products or other goods. Such agencies, they also basically determine and they also prescribe a change in the laws. First is the control of supply. Supply is necessary. Like for example, if there is uh, uh, less supply in the market, like for example, if there's a hoarding of products, particularly commodities, the rates or the prices of commodities, they rise. So government ensures that there is adequate supply of the commodities in the markets or the essential goods in the market. So this is one basically concern. And then we have the control of rates. That means the prices of the goods or the services. These regulatory agencies, whether it's IRDA or whether it's whether other those regulatory, they control the prices of the goods. For example, the drug prices control order. Drug prices and control order, it determines the prices of essential pharmaceutical products. And there are certain products which are produced and they are sold by multinational companies in the country. And this particular drug prices control order, it regulates the prices of those essential drugs for particularly those lifestyle, those ailments like heart diseases or nervous disorders or cancer and other such diseases. So those rates, they are controlled. Likewise, the ceiling rates and the floor rates, they are also controlled. So floor prices, particularly of agriculture products, so they are determined by the government. Then control of conduct. Number one, information, that there are certain products which are harmful for consumption, and statutory warnings they are to be given on the packaging itself, particularly on tobacco products. So that information has to be there and put by the companies. Standards are there. For example, ISI standard for the electrical appliances or such products. And then product banishments are there. Certain drugs, for example, if they are harmful or it's discovered that those drugs, they have a higher side effect on the patients, sometimes those drugs, they are banned from the shelves of the retailers of pharmaceutical products. And so the government agencies, they come up with such type of rules where those products cannot be sold in the market. So this basically was just an introduction to the law, and any particular query, if you have, we can discuss that issue relating to any term which you come across in this slide. No issue. Okay, we still have 8 and nearly 10 or so minutes. Remaining meeting time 1 minute and 41 seconds. So since the session was for 40 minutes only, so we have just 1 minute left. We can, if there is any discussion, we can take up that. Or if you want to discuss any of these issues, or any other query if you have, perhaps you can note down, and we can discuss at the start of the next session that we may have on particular, that would be on Tuesday, I think. Yes, on Tuesday we can discuss that issue. So no issues at the moment. Okay, so I'll end up this class.